Good morning. This is thought stream which came up last night when I read somebody in some group had written about some Muslim had written to a group of Muslims lamenting why we, as in the Muslims, are so powerless. There's some 57 countries which has Muslim majorities and etc. etc. And we seem to be very high on consumption lists, but we don't seem to have produced anything much. We don't seem to have created anything much. We don't seem to have any kind of power to drive any agenda whatsoever. We seem to be disunited. We seem to have serious problems, social problems in all the Muslim countries, and though they didn't say it, in countries in which Muslims make up a fair chunk of population, even if when they are not in majority. So why are these problems there? And then, of course, that same person seems to have answered that with obviously everyone answers with their own um, ideas, and he felt that that's because so many things we don't do right, and that's why we are in this morass. So I felt that I should think about it and answer that. So I did think about it, and of course I've been thinking about that a long time, and I wrote back on that group as to what I think is the reason why we are in this situation. And of course, you know, no one responded to it. No one probably read it, and those who read it didn't want to respond to it for various reasons. Some may disagree with it. Some may have been afraid to respond to it. Whatever. Anyway, I think this is something which I need to put on my channel, so I'm putting it, and I'm reading off the screen of the laptop about this, and so it might be a little odd, but kindly bear with it. So here we are. So I'm answering that particular lament as to why Muslims are so powerless. The reason for this is very simple. I've begun the response. The reason for this is very simple. But we don't see this simple reason, and we don't see it because we don't want to see it. It goes like this: the most powerful are always those who have the best understanding of the reality, an understanding which is the most correct, that is the most fit one for continued success. In other words, those who can understand the reality well enough to predict the consequences of any set of actions the farthest are always the most powerful, thereby the winners. This is not just true of chess, but everything in life. So, if we want to be the most powerful, we have to be able to understand reality the best in terms of what will lead to what and what else. How can I be sure of this? If we understand the reality well enough to know, for example, that putting our neck between the wheels and the rails of a running train is not going to lead us to top our class in the 10th board exam, and our rival believes that it will, chances are that if we both work our strategies, I will top that exam and my rival will be dead before he finishes writing the exam. The example I gave was purposefully a ridiculous one, since we need to culture and grow our ideas to ridiculous extent to know which has managed to pass the photo finish of unpopular or unobvious ideas. Tweak this as much as you want. You will find that always the one who understands reality better will predict it better and will thus succeed more often and cumulatively win the race. So, what allows us to understand reality better? We can all give hackneyed answers like better education, harder work, better prayers, and whatnot. But which of these are proximate or seeming reasons, and which fundamental? Finding that is not a simple job. I hypothesize that the fundamental reason is the ability and the ability and the environment to express freely. To express freely. Why do I say that? We all have 100 ideas a day, perhaps more. Which of these ideas reflect better? Which of these ideas reflect reality better than other rival ideas, ours as well as others? To figure that out, we must have the freedom to air those ideas, to express those ideas, no matter how crazy, outlandish, opposed to the received wisdom, or painful they seem to be. Only when we air those ideas do we even ourselves hear ourselves speak and figure out the truthfulness, the realness, and the value that this idea carries. Sometimes we reject it based on our own cleaning it up in preparation for the presentation, sometimes upon others' earnest and honest reaction to it, sometimes we modify it. Others then test the idea. All the time, the net result is that we get closer to a fitter understanding of the reality. To a fitter, as in the Darwinian understanding of fitness, the evolutionary understanding of fitness. So, uh, so all the time, the net result is that we get closer to a fitter understanding of the reality. In fact, I dare say that the freedom of expression is the freedom to think. The freedom of expression is the freedom to think. We, and this is basically because a Muslim had lamented to the Muslims, other Muslims, about what he thought was Muslim powerlessness. So, we Muslims are at the bottom of all learning, understanding, knowing, and powerfulness lists. We Muslims are at the bottom of all learning, understanding, knowing, and powerfulness lists because we have incarcerated our thinking, put boundaries on it, within which only do we allow a Muslim person to think. This is not new. This is not new. It has been going on for more than 800 years now. Inside those limits, we have excelled. For example, in architecture, say Taj Mahal, ghazal, poetry or ghazal, say Ghalib, and lots more. However, in the matters of uncovering truth, that is science, philosophy, etc., we as Muslims allow other Muslims, even our loved ones, zero freedom to express. Thereby, zero freedom to think. Our expressions are stale. Thus, our thoughts are of poor quality. We, therefore, in the last 800 years or so, have discovered nothing, invented nothing, created nothing in these crucial areas which grant long-term power. We are at the leading edge of nothing. We are at the bleeding edge of nothing. We are not even in the mainstream, nor in the trailing edge of anything, nor at the trailing edge of anything. We are at the absolute flailing and failing edge of everything. We are at the absolute failing and flailing edge of everything. And this only because we put limits on the thinking of our thinkers, on the creative limits of our creators, on the limits of expression of our performers. We have got precisely what we deserve. Nothing. Big zeros. And this because our thought leaders, can think nothing better than what they are being brainwashed with for 800 years. And let me explain. Who do even educated professional Muslims go to? I mean, other than those who are liberal or actually atheist, or no more believing in the Islamic dogma, if you leave those aside, or secular Muslims, secular as in not in the Indian definition of secular, but in the actual meaning of the word secular, which is that you don't believe in any religion. So leave those aside. Even educated Muslims go and listen to all these bayans by all these people with big beards, all these ulama, all these people who are supposedly uh, mm, the banks of wisdom, who know how a Muslim and how every human being should behave. And uh, these ulama, what are they taught? What is their course like? Their courses are basically largely either a copy or modeled around Dars-e Nizamiya. This was a course which was developed, I think, about 800 years or so back, or even a little later than, even a little earlier than that. And um, since in Islamic jurisprudence, uh, any usage of your brain is essentially forbidden, because uh, there's an there's an Arabic word for it, which I am for the moment forgetting. Um, ijtihad. Ijtihad. So ijtihad has been outlawed by these ulama around the time of Al-Ghazali and Al-Ghazali himself, which is approximately the, the 12th century or so, which has sort of defined for Muslims that you know deen or religion or the way to live has been defined fully and completely by Quran, by Hadith, and by the Seerat of the Prophet, by his actual doings, how he was. And at the most, the codification which was done in the next 400 years or so, 500 years. And now Muslims don't need to think anything more. Even Muslim ulema as in it's a plural of alim, alim as in scholar, as in a learned person, a researcher, so to say, at the at the leading edge of all thought and decision making of Islamic world. So even they are no more allowed to think and modify and reform. Every reform, every innovation, in fact, the word innovation itself is seen in negative light. So innovation is a bad word in Muslim in Islamic thought process. Everything has been done, proven. It's very much like Hindutva. It's all these political religious religions. Political religious ideologies like Islamism, like Hindutva, like Zionism, or even communism, for example. So all these ideologies which become dogmas, which become uh, hard coded, uh, uh, developed ideologies which are no more allowed to be tinkered with. So these don't allow you the freedom to think any further. These don't allow you the freedom to change anything, modify, innovate anything. These believe that in the heyday of their greatness, their golden era, everything that is worth writing has been written, everything that's worth understanding has been understood, everything that's worth doing in here has been done. So now all you need to do is follow and nothing more. You can you can hear all these Hindutva idiots telling you how all science is already available in ancient Hindu texts, and I can bet you that I have read more Hindu texts than all these Hindutva leaders combined. Get Modi's cabinet together, and I probably have read more Hindu texts than they have. But that's beside the point. That's exactly the same with Muslims, and more so with you know these religious types. So they believe that ijtihad is no more permissible, innovation is a bad word, you shouldn't reform anything, you shouldn't change anything. So imagine these guys who are ossified in their thinking, and limited in their thinking by an 800 years old syllabus. What do you think they can guide? How much do you think they'll have? How much vastness of intellect would they have, who are not even allowed to exercise their intellect, that they will be able to guide you properly? Of course, whatever I am looking and speaking directly at the screen, I have not written in that, because I know if I write there, all these guys will be fuming and will bay for my blood. They'll say, "How can you say this? And you're so bad, and you're so mean, and you're doing all this because shaitan has gone into your head, and that you're not thinking properly, and that you should pray more often so that your thinking will become better," and so on and so forth. That's what they will tell me. But I was just explaining it. What do I mean by this? These thought leaders. These are the thought leaders which even uh, provide thought leadership to educated Muslims. Uh, every Muslim that goes for namaz, uh, which has a khutbah, will find that these people will give you khutbahs, which of course have so many good things, there's no doubt about that. But uh, they also have this, this limit, this boundary that is put around your head and around your thinking. So even educated Muslims are not capable of thinking beyond that, outside of that boundary, outside of that box. So the Muslim thinking has been boxed in by this 800-year-old curriculum. So even educated Muslims dare not think beyond that. So forget about those illiterate Muslims who really don't even have access to educated Muslims. All the access that they have is to that alim fellow, who all he has done is that learned Quran by rote, and then learned some other things by rote, and the courses that they study at advanced levels, what do they read? What are the things that? One example is that they learn about the philosophy of grammar of Arabic. For God's sake, teach them some physics, some mathematics, maybe even some economics. So if you don't, if you have science illiterates and maths illiterates and economics illiterates leading the thought, what do you get? You get an illiterate set of people. Yeah, they might have PhDs. They might even have PhDs in technology areas. Now, the difference between technology and science is that actually philosophy is the mother of science. Science is the mother of technology. Now, technology is only implementing things. So, that you can do without challenging anything. That is within that box. So, technology Muslims can do. I mean, like I said, Taj Mahal. It's a wonderful, you know, piece of architecture, of art. So much other art Muslims have done really beautifully, but all that within what is permissible, within this thing. And who are the people who actually go out of that? Those who, at least in their mind, are secular, who are not driven by uh, the thoughts of the fears that they must think only within this boundary. They must create within this boundary. They must perform within this boundary. They must express within this boundary. So that's the whole issue. That's simple. That's clear. That's clear as daylight. Yet, you know, you have Muslims who set up all kinds of huge hardware. They'll make big buildings for universities, but you know, they will only do things, and they may do those very well, those which are within that boundary, that limit. So the thing is, you can do some technology, but the moment that technology has to go back to science and bring out fundamental changes, Muslims can't do it. They can probably, and when I say Muslims, I mean believing Muslims, they can't do it. They can only tweak little bits, little things they can tweak, for which they don't have to go to science, and forget about philosophy. There isn't a single Muslim philosopher, even the person who is bandied about as a Muslim philosopher is Iqbal, and really, that guy doesn't know the difference between his toe and his finger. So, with all due respect to his poetry, which can be quite beautiful in places, as a thinker, as a philosopher, he's nowhere. He's pedestrian, and so are all other. You look at the quality of philosophy which has been churned out by Hindu philosophers, by Jain philosophers, by Buddhist philosophers, by secular Western philosophers, by Greek pagan philosophers, and these are humongously more deep than is any possible Islamic philosophy. In fact, that phrase itself is an impossibility that cannot exist. So, and that is true of all these political religious ideologies, and that's the reason why you find that again, at every juncture today, ever since the Hindutva forces are leading, India is flailing. And so long as these forces are at the peak, India will be like Muslim countries. probably the only you know uh, only exception to this rule is Israel, because they have two different pockets. There is one pocket which is the political Judaism, which is Zionism, and there are these secular Jews who who are hugely educated and who are not limited in any way in their thought processes, and they have somehow found a way of not treading on each other's toes. So that's why this has happened. But this doesn't seem to be happening in in Hindutva countries and in Islamic countries. So unless there is this change, both these sects are going to the dogs. And I respect dogs, so probably that's unfair. But anyway, let me go on with this thing that I wrote. So where was I? So I will just double back a little, and I'll start reading it again. So this is not new. What is not new? We Muslims are at the bottom of all learning, understanding, knowing, and powerfulness lists, because we have incarcerated our thinking, put boundaries on it within which only do we allow a Muslim person to think. This is not new. It has been going on for more than 800 years now. Inside those limits, we have excelled, for example, in architecture, like Taj Mahal, in poetry or ghazal, like Ghalib, and lots more. However, in the matter of uncovering truths, that is science, philosophy, etc., we as Muslims allow other Muslims, even our loved ones, zero freedom to express, thereby to think. Our expressions are stale, 800 years old stale. So our expressions are stale, thus our thoughts are of poor quality. We are therefore in the last 800 years or so, discovered nothing, invented nothing, created nothing in these crucial areas which grant long-term power. We are at the leading edge of nothing. We are at the bleeding edge of nothing. We are not even in the mainstream nor at the trailing edge of anything. We are at the absolute failing and flailing edge of everything. And this only because we put limits on the thinking of our thinkers, on the creative limits of our creators, on the limits of expression of our performers. We got precisely what we deserve, nothing. And this because our thought leaders can think nothing better than what they are being brainwashed with for 800 years. All good intentions will go for a naught, since we neither think freely nor allow others to think freely. If you want this situation to change, grant those within your spheres of influence. Grant those within your spheres of influence the freedom to express, thereby the freedom to think. So I'm addressing these Muslims that if you want this situation to change, grant those within your sphere of influence the freedom to express, thereby the freedom to think. Unless we grant the freedom, a new paragraph starts from unless. I read it wrongly. So let me read it again. If you want this situation to change, grant those within your sphere of influence the freedom to express, thereby the freedom to think. Unless we grant the freedom to our own Mansurs to say An al-Haq, and our own Sarmats to say La ilaha, we will forever remain the vermin of the entire human existence. And in case you want to figure out, I won't take any more of your time, what I meant by Mansurs, just go and Google Mansur al-Hallaj. Mansur, MANSOR, al-Hallaj, AL-HALLAJ, and Sarmad Shahid, SARMAD, Sarmad Shahid, SHAHEED. So these are the two references. Unless we grant the freedom to our own Mansurs to say An al-Haq and to our own Sarmads to say La ilaha, we will forever remain the vermin of the entire human existence. The choice is ours to make for every single one of us. Choose wisely. This is what I wrote, and there's not a single response. That's where we are, Muslims. We lament, we don't do anything, we can't do anything. All we actually do is consume. We are pests, we are viruses, we are vermin. We take the benefits that the secular society gives to everyone, that the liberal thought creates for us, that the freedom of expression brigade creates for us Muslims. We consume that. We are great consumers. But we don't do anything to repay back that debt. That's where we have been for at least 800 years. Ever since Ghazali died, Al-Ghazali died in the year 1111. That's where we are. I don't think my striving or my talks or my fights will change anything. Just like when I talk to all the humanity by all our regarding all our screw ups as humans and our lessons, this here also no one will listen unless they want to shout me down. But that's what I have to do, and I'll keep doing. Bye. Allah Hafiz.